And Amanda Ravenhill, you have the platform.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Happy Earth Day, or Spaceship Earth Day, perhaps. So I am currently with the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and our vision is what Bucky wrote out as the objective of the World Game, which is this alternative to war strategy games. It's a world peace game. And it's my personal mission, and actually my husband and I included it in our vows. And I invite you all to take it with you as your vision and mission. So it is to make the world work for 100% of humanity. And that's all about playing a positive sum game, which we'll get into in a little bit, in the shortest possible time. I think we all know how urgent this moment is right now. Through spontaneous cooperation, which I think is one of the core essences of regeneration, without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. It's a mouthful, it's a riddle, it's a mantra, it's a lot. But I invite you all to take it and run with it. So what does regenerative mean? I like to break it down into 3 different components. It's about cooperation, it's about complexity, and it's about celebration. So cooperation is really about kind of moving from a competitive, I can only benefit at your expense kind of model that we've been in, this kind of zero-sum game, over into a cooperative stance where together through co-mutualism, we can actually evolve together. Complexity is all about really understanding the dynamism of life and emergence, and this idea that things are nonlinear and incredibly interdependent and non-predictable. And if we can appreciate that, we can kind of plan for the indirect effects that will always result from any action. And instead of them being negative, unintended consequences, they can turn into cascading benefits. And then celebration is what greases the whole thing and makes it all happen, and is so critical right now in this moment when we're flipping our cultural kind of humanity identity from being this cancerous poison into apex healers rather than apex predators on our planet. And there's a lot to celebrate, and we'll get into that in a moment. But this is, I think, a really core piece of regeneration, and without it, let's not even talk about that. Okay. So complexity. This is a really cool visualization from the Digital Universe Atlas. And we're about to go on a tour of the entire observable universe. And so complexity teaches us about whole systems, that there's always a larger whole within which to look. So that was Earth and all of its satellites, then the moon orbit. We see our solar system here. Earth is zooming around at 66,000 miles per hour there. We see our constellations here, and they're about to fold in, showing their kind of relative location to us. And the Milky Way galaxy, we're running around at 500,000 miles per hour there. And these are all the galaxies that we've actually mapped. And we look out and we see that the observable universe looks like something like a cosmic butterfly, and we go all the way out to the Big Bang radiation. And I just give you this as a kind of a visual mantra to call back on when you're working on problems and trying to do so from a regenerative point of view. Always remember that there's a larger whole that you can zoom out into. And once you do that, whether it's temporally or geographically or across other spectrums, you might be able to see something that you wouldn't have seen before, and be able to create more benefit and more value that creates more value in its wake. So this is another diagram to teach us about complexity. One thing that Buckminster Fuller liked to say is that the wind doesn't actually blow from the northeast, it sucks from the southwest. And that's kind of a kind of trick and riddle to teach us about complexity. We're often looking at the causes of things as their effects, or vice versa. And sometimes they're mutually causal, so you can't call one the other. You can't distinguish between the two. But this is a neat visualization of showing how wind currents affect tidal currents, affect these larger conveyor belts of heat and coolth that go around our beautiful, living, breathing planet that we get to call home. And I just love looking at these visualizations. I also have to thank David McConville, who's previously the board chair of Buckminster Fuller Institute, for teaching me about these. These are all from NASA and the European Space Agency that we're about to see. So getting into cooperation, the second piece here. Cooperation is seen here in this incredible visualization that shows our living, breathing planet. So because our axis happens to be tilted, we have seasons, and because we have seasons, we have this breath of life that happens every year, where there's more photosynthesis happening on the bigger part of the land, which is in the northern hemisphere, and we do this big inhale every summer in the northern hemisphere, and then exhale in the winter. And this is teaching us about cooperation, how this living planet, this Gaia supra-organism, as it were, is cooperating in order to balance out our temperature and our humidity and other really important elements of what keeps us in this homeodynamic state as a planet. And another great lesson here about cooperation is around trees. So the trick here is regeneration is all about looking at living systems as inspiration, but we've been learning about living systems in a reductionist view, so it can be kind of confusing. So you can say, oh, I'm going to look to a tree for inspiration, and oh, that tree is competing with that other tree for sunlight, and that's all they do. But that's really a reductionist view of what's going on in a forest, whereas trees actually use the mycorrhizal or mushroom root network in order to convey information, warning signals, nutrients, et cetera, in what Suzanne Simard calls the wood wide web. So that's cooperation for you. This is another great visualization. This is plankton from all over the world. And what's neat about this is it kind of tells a cool story around whales and how actually when there's more whales which eat krill, there's actually more krill around. And so it teaches us to kind of rewire our thinking about, I can only benefit at your expense, when actually by working together we can co-evolve and be in mutual relationship. So whales actually, they upwell nutrients and cold water from the depths, and they actually end up fertilizing the top layers of the ocean and provide more habitat for krill and the other things that they eat. And then that creates this trophic cascade of all of this life that comes down into the different trophic layers of the ecosystem, which is a really important part of the blue carbon movement that's happening right now, which is taking the excess trillion tons of carbon that we have in the atmosphere and putting it back into life in the oceans through mangroves and wetlands and mammal populations and fish. So that's cooperation for you. And then celebration. This is an incredible visualization of the force field that we have around this planet. It's called the magnetosphere. And it's just one of the most amazing things that we have, all of the different things that it requires for us to have co-evolved to this point, to have these amazing genius brains to figure out how to make the world work for 100% of humanity. We have a force field because the planet happened to cool at the proper time that we have a magnetic or a magma core that allows for that magnetic field. You can see it in the aurora borealis visualized here. And I think it's just so important that we celebrate just how special this is and how special we are. Another piece to celebrate here is this is a new satellite, or this is a new mechanism that just went up on the ISS called JEDI, yes. The Global Ecosystem Dynamics something. And it's measuring, with LiDAR from the ISS, it's measuring all of the tree cover around the world, and we're going to have a map of biodiversity and tree cover. It's going to take 10 billion photos in the next 2 years, and it's going to teach us kind of how we can learn more about the tree cover and the canopies and learn more about biodiversity and do this great thing that is, I think, core to regeneration too, which is starting from potential instead of starting with problems. And so we have more and more tools as we're co-evolving and creating this technology, which is nature, which is us, and we're just kind of coming to using it for our best interest. So that was a lot. Those are the three components of regeneration and kind of some of the paradigm shifts that'll help us get there. This is another set of shifts that we're moving towards right now. I misheard someone say regeneration once, and I heard them say generous economy, and I was like, that is genius. It's so approachable. So I'm running with it. So shift to a generous economy. We're moving from ownership to a sharing economy, from a product economy to a service or caring economy, from take, make, waste to circular, from extractive to gifting. And then we're also moving from shareholders to stakeholders, closed to open source, limited data to big data, and most importantly, humans versus nature to humans co-evolving and actually being nature. So all of this is happening, and I'm super excited about it. I think everyone else should be. What Bucky called it was the design science revolution, this kind of combination of bringing design and science together. You can see there's so much happening, everything from appropriate technology to crowdsourcing to permaculture to climate justice, complexity science, et cetera. But it is alive and well. Kevin will go into this, but yeah, as was mentioned, I helped co-found Drawdown, and it was a huge cooperative. I'm going to try to use all three. It was a huge cooperative project that really identified the complexity of climate science and solutions and really celebrates how we can do this and paints a picture of actually we can achieve drawdown, which is this point when concentrations of greenhouse gases begins to decline and then temperatures begin to decline about 25 years later. So we can actually reverse global warming, we can get to global cooling within the lifetime of a lot of the people in this room today. And when I found that out, it changed everything for me. Like, that is not being told anywhere. And I think it's so, so critical that we celebrate that. Yeah, and just know that we can do it. Like, no words. Anyway. I'll just finish by saying that Buckminster Fuller put the task at hand very well when he said that it is now highly feasible to take care of everybody on Earth at a higher standard of living than any have ever known. It no longer has to be you or me. Selfishness is unnecessary and war is obsolete. It is a matter of converting our high technology from weaponry to livingry. Thank you.